Hi, everyone. Brian Kulak, Chief Academic Officer for the district.
And my name's Dave Walsh. I'm a high school science teacher. I teach specifically chemistry and a little bit of physics, a little bit of astronomy, just kind of whatever. Whatever physical science you need, I got it.
So the point of these screencasts is to kind of show you from an administrative and classroom teacher perspective what is expected during an observation. So what you're looking at here is Domain 2, the classroom environment, something which we can absolutely see happening live when we come in. So we'll go through each of these components, which you can see with a number and a letter, and talk about from each of our perspectives what we expect to see. So creating an environment of respect and rapport, frankly, again, is I think just a very human quality. I think if you struggle with this, I'm not really sure how you ended up in teaching. Frankly, it's just being human. It's communicating with the kids. It's knowing your kids, which we talked about in Domain 1, if you saw that video. And ultimately, and the biggest thing, is making connections. And I can talk about that in any number of ways, but I'm going to let Dave talk about just how to make connections with kids that will then facilitate learning.
Yeah, and I mean, you just have to realize that kids are real people too, and that they can react to things differently than you're expecting. And, you know, I think the more that you listen to a student, the better that the relationship and the rapport will come. And I just think that in order to push yourself over to the higher numbers, I think it's just way more important to, listen to what a student is saying to you, and react and respond to those things.
And when you have the active kids, you want to talk about the field hockey goal that she scored yesterday, or the amazing performance that he put on at the play last night. All these things, again, go back to human quality that is essential to a quality career in education. So be as human as possible and make sure that your kids see you as human.
And I think that Brian touched on a good point. I think all the kind of the components of this domain are why we are teachers. This is kind of like what the teacher soul that a person has. Like we want to make sure that the kids are feeling good. We want to make sure that we're managing our classroom. We want to make sure that there's learning happening all over the place. So this is kind of, when in doubt, kind of make sure that your teacher soul wins the battle, and I don't think you'll lose here.
I love that phrase, teacher soul. I had not thought of that. That's a really good point. And that will help you with 2B, which is establishing a culture for learning. And I'll boil this down as simply as I can to say that learning should be a shared experience as often as possible, so that when your kids are learning from you, they should also see you learning from them in any way that happens, even if it's the newest app that they want you to check out, or a new song they want you to hear, but just a shared experience where they get to your class, they want to learn because you've established some sort of precedence for rapport that will lead them to learning.
And learning doesn't have to look a certain way either. That learning can happen in the most seemingly chaotic sorts of things over and over again. I hear teachers talking to me, Brian, about this, is that, I don't want this lesson to be observed because, my students are going to be all over the place, and they're going to be, it's going to look chaotic. And I don't think that is anything that an administrator looks down upon at all. They want to see active learning, and they want to make sure that the culture for learning is there. So, learning can look a million different ways, and don't be nervous about being observed on a day that's seemingly, non-traditional.
Yeah, what a great point. I did one last year. It was a short observation with the middle school language arts teacher, and when she saw me coming, she said, well, this isn't a good day. I'm not going to be doing much. The kids are doing all the work. And I sat down and watched and observed it. That's exactly what we want to see, because all of these domains and components do tie together. We don't need to see you on stage for it to be considered a good lesson. So Dave's chaos theory or my passive, it doesn't make a difference. We want to see what normally goes on in your room. And if the kids are working and you're off stage, that is because the culture for learning has been established for sure. C and D, the classroom procedures and student behavior, do go together, and I'm going to, again, just kind of say that Dave said this well as we prepared for this. If you think about C, classroom procedures are those things that should just sort of happen sort of naturally and then are not penalized. So you wouldn't penalize a kid, let's say, for not opening the window or turning off the lights or collecting work by rows. You just expect it, and that's been set up pretty early by you. So routines are pretty clear. And that also extends to transitions, which is huge for administrator. When we see you say, all right, guys, great job. Now we're going to move on to this. It shows us that you've planned, that you have some sort of coherence to what you're trying to do. And the kids know, okay, that part of the lesson's over, and now we're going to move on to another one.
And I think as a teacher, Brian hit on something very good. If Brian's saying that he's looking for transitions, I think that that's something that as a teacher, I'm going to say, hey, I better make sure that my transitions are meaningful and accurate and fit into the lesson. Not that it's anything that I am going to stress out about horribly the day of, but here we are. Brian is specifically saying we're looking for transitions. So you know what? Make sure you have good transitions. There it is.
Yep.
We're very kind of informal right now, but Brian still is an administrator and I'm still a teacher, and I want to make sure that I'm doing what people are looking for, so if he's thinking that transitions are important, let's do it. And I think that all that aside, transitions are important. You don't want to do something totally ridiculous backed up against something totally serious. You need to make sure the transitions are there. The learning happens when transitions are good.
Yeah, that's a good point. And the next one, the managing student behavior, really does speak to, unfortunately, that which can be penalized. If you have set up a code of conduct and you've made pretty clear what you expect on a daily basis, both between you and the students and each other, then this is where you might have to get involved with the discipline process, and that's totally fine. We also want you to communicate about behavior, both positively and negatively. So if something does happen in the class that needs to be addressed, how will you handle it, whether I'm there or not? And when a kid is either predictably or unpredictably good during a lesson, let's talk about that, because that goes a long way when you tell that kid, man, you had a really good day today, out loud in front of his peers. That will change everything for you.
And I also think that there's a notion out there, Brian can probably speak to this a little bit too, is that, just because you had a kid act up in your class, all of a sudden you feel like you're going to be judged negatively for that. It's not, everybody knows that kids are kids and they're going to behave the way that's going on. You're not going to get a bad rating in this category or in this domain or component, right?
Mm-hmm.
In this component, just because a kid acts up and screams out at you, it's do you have the way to cope with that, or do you have something, and that's what it is. So don't feel like your students have to be perfect little angels for the observation. And probably if you have an administrator in your room, the administrator may want to even see when it's not going perfectly. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's valuable information for them as well.
Yep.
And for you, you don't grow if everything is perfect in your classroom. You grow when things start hitting the fan.
Going awry.
Sure. Right.
Yeah. And last one, 2E. Look, I mean, this is really kind of a safety kind of thing. Are you setting up your classroom in a way that's accessible? Are you using technology in a way that's seamless? Or do you need to take 10 minutes to hook up your projector? That would be something we'd be looking at here. And one thing I will talk about, I've seen over and over again, and this will probably apply to new teachers, is when you share a room, that's important to note, because you might be walking into a room that is in disarray and you might need to take time to organize it. Or are you leaving a room in disarray? So I know if you're a floater, this changes, but really this should just be, are the kids safe? Is it orderly? And can I do what I need to do efficiently in 2E?
And also being a science teacher, I always think about the safety, yes, but making sure that the lab is going to go on without a hitch, organizing the physical space in that way so that the kids can do the lab in an effective way, which adds another little hitch in the get along when I'm thinking about rearranging my room or putting things differently somehow. So.
Yeah, this one is not something that I think anybody particularly worries about, because classrooms are the way they are. But I'll go back to what Dave said, and if you want to do something funky with your classroom because we're coming, that's totally fine. And if you never do anything with your classroom and the way it is the way it is, that's totally fine too. A lot of this Dave talked about prior is stylistic. A lot of 2 is stylistic, and it should be, because the last thing we want is carbon copies of each other throughout the district. So that is our 2, domain 2 screencast. Sorry guys, this is the last one we did, so I'm starting to stammer here at the end. Yeah, thanks for listening. We hope they were helpful.